she had been standing in the cold, sterile briefing room for what felt like hours. Listening to the colonel drone on about strategy and team priorities, every word he spoke cut sharper than any battlefield wound, though not in a way she could show. He dismissed her ideas with a flick of his hand, a scoff, a tone that implied she was barely worth noticing. She clenched her fists under the table, her knuckles white, her patience stretched thin. She was no ordinary officer, but he didn't know that, not yet. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. The colonel's eyes swept over the room, sharp, calculating, but missing entirely the truth standing right in front of him. To him, she was just another young officer trying too hard, too loud, too visible. He had no idea that beneath the tailored uniform, the poised posture, and the calm voice, she carried decades of experience. She had commanded troops, orchestrated covert operations, and earned medals that hung heavier than his arrogance could ever weigh. Today, however, she was undercover, a ghost hidden in plain sight. And every dismissal he threw at her was a test she had long anticipated. She had learned early in her career that authority often came disguised as ignorance, and yet it stung. The colonel's words, though unknowing, felt like small fires against her resolve. She adjusted her notes quietly, letting him talk, letting him underestimate her. She had played this part many times before, smiling, nodding, pretending, all while observing, calculating, preparing for the exact moment when truth would strike. Outside the room, the wind rattled the thin metal siding of the base, carrying with it the scent of rain and the faint temps of gun oil. Inside, the air was tense, almost suffocating. Every officer felt it, even those who didn't know why. There was a storm brewing, not in the skies above, but in the very structure of authority, and she stood at its center. She thought she would remain invisible, a shadow among the uniformed figures, till the colonel made the mistake that every arrogant superior eventually makes. He overestimated his control. "Are you even paying attention?" he barked suddenly, his voice cutting through the low hum of whispered side conversations. The room froze. Eyes darted nervously. She kept her gaze steady, calm, almost inviting, as if to say, "Yes, I am. More than you know." The colonel leaned back in his chair, smirking. "I'll ask again, and this time try to give an answer that makes sense." Her pulse quickened out of fear, but in anticipation. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind. Every word she would say, every pause, every nuance had been measured. And yet, despite her preparation, a thread of uncertainty teased at her. Would he recognize her authority before it was too late? Or would she have to force the revelation, abrupt and undeniable, like a thunderclap in a quiet valley? She exhaled slowly, letting the tension coalesce into controlled energy. "Sir," she began, her voice calm, almost soft, "I've analyzed the operation from every angle. The current plan exposes the unit to unnecessary risk. There's a safer approach that ensures mission success without casualties." The colonel's laughter echoed, hollow and patronizing. "You suggesting a strategy that could rival mine? You're ambitious, I'll give you that. But strategy isn't a game for rookies." Ambition, she realized, was exactly what he feared. And yet, beneath the fear, there was the vulnerability of a man who had never faced someone who could outthink him in silence. She let the silence stretch, just long enough for him to feel it, to taste the uncomfortable doubt creeping at the edges of his certainty. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "Explain. Convince me," and she did. Her voice was precise, deliberate. She mapped out the operation, layer by layer, exposing flaws he hadn't noticed, and proposing subtle, elegant solutions. Every officer in the room leaned in, captivated not by her rank, which they assumed modest, but by the clarity of her vision. The colonel's smirk faltered. The laughter he had wielded as a weapon dissolved into a furrowed frown. Minutes passed like hours. She could feel the shift in the air, the subtle change of power, almost invisible but undeniable. He was trying to regain control, but the room itself seemed to realign around her authority, the truth of her competence radiating quietly, insistently. Finally, the colonel slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. Who are you really?" Her eyes met his, steady, unwavering. And for the first time, the room went completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. Every whispered comment, every shuffle of papers ceased. "I am who you should have respected from the beginning," she said, her voice firm yet warm. "I am General Harper, and I've been overseeing this operation from the inside." The revelation struck like lightning. His eyes widened, jaws dropped. Some officers whispered incredulously. Others stared, speechless. The colonel's face drained of color, disbelief twisting his features into something unrecognizable. He had been standing before a superior, and not just any superior, but one who had orchestrated missions that even he could scarcely comprehend. She let the moment linger, letting the weight of authority sink into every corner of the room. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about recognition, about ensuring that competence and wisdom were acknowledged, regardless of the ego that had tried to suppress them. The colonel finally swallowed, his voice tight. I had no idea." "I know," she said gently. "That's the point. Leadership isn't about who speaks the loudest or who demands the most attention. It's about presence, preparation, and the courage to act when it matters." He nodded slowly, a grudging respect forming where arrogance had once stood. Around them, the officers began to murmur again, this time with a sense of awe and relief. Some approached her quietly, offering congratulations, tentative at first. Then more confidently, as they realized that the woman before them had navigated years of impossible challenges and emerged stronger, wiser, and compassionate. Later, as the room emptied, she stayed behind for a moment, watching the sunlight slant through the blinds, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the air. Her hands, which had been trembling just slightly at the beginning, were now steady, relaxed. She had accomplished more than a single mission today. She had reminded everyone present that true leadership was often invisible until revealed at the right moment. But the day's lesson wasn't just for the colonel or her teammate, was for herself too. She reflected on every dismissal, every doubt cast her way, and realized that resilience wasn't born of victories alone. It was forged in the quiet moments of frustration, in the spaces where recognition was withheld, and where patience was tested. She left the briefing room, walking with a calm confidence that radiated through every step. Outside, the base was alive with activity. Soldiers moved in unison, tools clinking, vehicles humming, radios buzzing. The world was as chaotic as ever, but now, there was a subtle shift, an awareness that leadership could be quiet, unassuming, yet profoundly impactful. Weeks later, the mission she had guided covertly unfolded flawlessly. Casualties were avoided, objectives met with precision, and the team returned with a sense of pride and unity that had been absent before. She observed from the command center, a quiet smile on her lips. Knowing that the best victories were often invisible, yet undeniably real, and the colonel, he never underestimated her again. Not in the slightest. He learned to listen, to respect, to recognize that authority was earned, not claimed. More importantly, he learned humility, a lesson that no amount of rank or experience could substitute. In the quiet moments after the mission, as the base settled into a rare stillness, she found herself walking past the same briefing room where it all began. She paused, touching the edge of the table lightly. She remembered the tension, the doubts, the sting of being dismissed, and she allowed herself a small, private laugh. Some lessons, she knew, were meant to linger, to remind you of how far you'd come and how much patience it sometimes took to reveal your true strength. Because kindness doesn't vanish, it waits, and it finds its way back. In leadership, true leadership doesn't demand recognition. It inspires it silently, leaving echoes that last far longer than the moment of revelation. If there's one thing she wanted everyone to remember, it's this: respect the quiet strength in those around you. Often, the most formidable forces are the ones you least expect. Thank you for listening to this story. It inspired you. Share it in the comments. Tell me about a moment when someone surprised you with hidden strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate courage, resilience, and the quiet power of human determination.